Making money on the stock market. Greetings from Ballarat, Victoria, Australia. I'm Jerome Nugent-Smith and this is episode number 5. I'd like to talk to you today about how the fund grew, how long it took, what were sort of the returns in the early stages, mid-stage and the final stages of the fund, and what sort of amounts of money could be made during those different stages to end up to take the fund from $100,000 to $10.3 million plus, utilising the daily active trading strategy, as I've mentioned in the prior 4 episodes. So let's have a look at how the fund went and what were the opportunities over that period of time. I'll just touch on some highlights. First of all, at the beginning of March 2021, the fund had $100,000 invested in it, and it was in 10 stocks, $10,000 in each stock. So the first thing that had to be done was there was no spare cash, so 100% of the funds were in stocks and zero cash. And this is important in terms of pointing out the philosophy that evolved and was implemented over the past 6 months period. And it's the philosophy that I will use going forward in terms of the hedge fund investment that I'm proposing to set up. But anyway, so the first thing I had to do was to pick 1 or 2 stocks that had where the $10,000 had markedly appreciated and liquidate those stocks so that that money in turn could be invested in other stocks. And that's what happened about mid-March 2021, where one particular stock went from $10,000 to $25,000 and then subsequently formed the base over a week where it increased to over $70,000 and gave a much firmer base in terms of cash to share ratio. But to give you an idea, it took from March, all of March, April and May for the fund to increase from $100,000 to, at the end of May, to $1.2 million. And at that particular point in time, 2% of the funds were still invested in stocks, and 1.184 million was invested, or 98% was invested in, was in cash. So at that particular stage, after 3 months, apart from one stock, everything else had been liquidated, and the daily active trading strategies was well and truly on its way. From the next month, the fund doubled, went from $1.2 million, or almost doubled, to over $2 million. And the following month, it increased by a further $1 million. So at the end of July, the fund had gone from $100,000 to $3.3 million. Now here's where it became interesting. From in the month of August, the fund increased from $3.2 million, or 3.3, to $10.3 million. Now, if you think about this in terms of the active daily trading strategy and go back, in the early stages, basically I set an objective of making, in March, I think it was $5,000 a day profit in terms of the turnover. By the time we were getting to April and May, the figure had increased to $25,000 a day, and by the time August came, or July-August, the figure, the last 2 weeks of July running through to August, the daily objective was $250,000 profit per day. So from $5,000 to $250,000 profit per day. And basically the moral of this story in terms of the practical application of what I did was and demonstrate to my students at U3A and to the broader population of Ballarat through Radio 3BA was that basically money makes money. In other words, but bear in mind there was no leverage, there was no borrowing, At the end of each day, the fund was 100% liquid, and but it demonstrates the fact that you could, with a larger amount of money, that you can afford to move and take investment opportunities, moving up from the bottom of the penny dreadfuls, so to speak, through to the small caps, to the mid caps, to the blue chip stocks, which of course, obviously, the share price is much higher than down at the bottom end of the. So you're outlaying more money, but you can basically generate far greater amounts of money with those type of stocks. And so in August, for example, the maximum amount of daily profit was, I think it was in excess of $1.7 million, I think $1.725 million. And in some days I didn't trade at all. Admittedly, over the 6-month period, it wasn't that many days, but it did occur. So this was an example of building the fund, moving from a illiquid situation with the money tied up in penny dreadfuls to a 100% liquid situation where you had full liquidity. At the end of each day, the account was closed off and it was cash balance at the end of each day. So zero risks in terms of overnight, very quantifiable and measurable risks in terms of the intraday trading activities. But regardless of what the result was, you knew at the end of the day where you stood exactly, and there was no sleepless nights in terms of worrying about whether the Dow Jones or the Nasdaq or some other factor, such as occurred in China in August 2021, which destroyed some 35 stocks involved in the educational sector and wiped out billions and billions of dollars of off the top of blue chip stocks like Alibaba and Tencent and some of the investment funds in right around the world, not only in Australia but in China and so on, but in the US and Canadian markets, every market in the world and so on. So the fund was protected from those sorts of activities and so on, and that's the sort of just an example of the sort of practical strategy that I've adopted in terms of the daily active daily trades. So where next? Well, as I mentioned before in prior episodes, I'm looking to put together a hedge fund with $5 million in it to start out small, and the objective is to grow that fund from $5 million to in excess of $60 million, or a return of in excess of 1,000% over the next 12-month period. So that gives you a feel and a flavour for a very demonstrable strategy and subset of actions within that over that past 6 months, and the sort of things that I'll bring to the investment application moving forward. So thanks very much for your time. I look forward to catching up with you in episode 6 and revealing further secrets on the strategies. Bye for now.